Hi, I'm Rod Bryant, and welcome to this next lesson, this next session called Chiddushei Dat, and we're going to be dealing with this over a few sessions. First, let me say that we are attempting in this course to examine the most difficult texts, which are often misinterpreted or misquoted without proper understanding. There are many people who will approach, and when I say people, I'm talking about Jews, who will approach a non-Jew and simply quote these verses or these texts from the Mishnah and claim that this is the fact without full understanding of what the full work of the sages say about the pious non-Jew. So as we go through and read this text, it can be disturbing, but the very principal part of why we are doing this course for both the Noahide seeker as well as the Jew is to give us all a level playing field of understanding that come from the sages. For many years, I have wrestled with some of these concepts myself as being a Noahide and then a Noahide leader. And in themselves can be very, very troubling to read without understanding. So that's why this course is so very important for everyone to take and to actually go over the source material that are listed in the bottom of each one of the PDFs for the class. So take time, read through it, ask a lot of questions. Make sure that you send emails or show up to the 4 p.m. Central Standard Time Zoom Q&A session that we have every week, and you won't regret it. So let's get on to this idea, this fundamental principle, and it's called Chiddushei Dat. The fundamental principle to identity and practice of Noahides. However, it is a concept difficult for many Noahides to grasp. To those unfamiliar with the mechanics of the Torah, it appears to impose restrictions upon Noahide practice. Chiddushei Dat, though, does no such thing. It defines and protects the boundaries of Noahidism, actually preserving it as a unique identity. Now, Jews have a parallel, identical concept called Baal Tosef, defines what mitzvahs Jews may or may not do, and to the degree to which they modify or adopt new practices. In this lesson, we're going to introduce the concept of Baal Tosef and explain just how important it is to Noahides. First, let's look at Maimonides' Hilchot Malachim, Chapter 10, paragraph 9 and 10. Once again, we need to confront two difficult paragraphs in the writings of Maimonides. Often, Maimonides is quoted out of misinformation, and it ends up hurting a seeker or hurting a non-Jew who is wanting to know the truth. I hope today in this class and subsequent classes in dealing with these difficult texts that we're actually going to bring out the understanding and bring a tremendous amount of encouragement for the non-Jew. Now, going once again, chapter 10, paragraph 9 states this in Maimonides. A non-Jew who delves into Torah is obligated to die. You've probably heard that quoted by someone. They should only be involved in the study of their 7 commandments. Similarly, a non-Jew who rests even on a weekday, observing that day similarly to Shabbat, is obligated to die. Needless to say, this is also the case if he creates a festival for himself. The general rule governing these matters is this: they are not to originate a new religious or create a new religion or create and perform a mitzvah for themselves based on their own reasoning. Either convert and accept all mitzvahs or uphold their commandments without adding or detracting to them. Further states, if a Gentile delves into the Torah, Shabbat, or involves in a religious practice, he is beaten, punished, and informed him that he is obligated to die for his action. However, it states he's not executed. Now, examining paragraph 9, it says, in no uncertain terms that a Noahide, a non-Jew, may not observe the Shabbat, the Jewish festivals, or voluntarily keep any mitzvah of the Torah in which he is not commanded. It is clear that this is a serious matter. Why is it so dire, though, to deserve such a severe penalty of death? In paragraph 10, it states, should a non-Jew wish to perform one of the Torah's other mitzvahs in order to receive merit or benefit, we should not prevent him from doing so, even according to all of its details. If he brings an animal to be sacrificed as a burnt offering, we should accept it. This seems to be a contrasting idea juxtaposed to what was just stated. In paragraph 10, it teaches us that the non-Jew may voluntarily perform a mitzvah in which he is not commanded as long as he does it for reward. What is the need for the curious qualification? If a non-Jew who keeps the Sheva mitzvot gives charity, then we should accept it from him. It appears to me that it should be given to the Jewish poor, for the non-Jew receives this sustenance from the Jewish community who is obligated to support him. In contrast, if a regular non-Jew gives charity, we should accept it from him and give it to non-Jewish poor. Let's examine the sources and see if we can glean some better information. Let's go through Maimonides again, this time looking at his sources and some of the problems posed by his words. Paragraph 9 states, a non-Jew who delves into Torah is obligated to die. They should only be involved in the study of their Sheva mitzvot, or their 7 commandments. In Talmud Sanhedrin 59a, it learns from Deuteronomy 33, verse 4, that the Torah is a unique heritage given to Israel. As such, parts of it may not be studied by non-Jews and even Noahides. The exact detail of this prohibition will be examined extensively in the future and further down the road in some other lessons. Similarly, a non-Jew who rests even on the weekday, observing a day similar to Shabbat, is obligated to die. Those are tough words to read and to hear, but we're going to get better understanding. Needless to say, this is also the case if he creates a festival for himself. As you ponder these ideas, we're going to bring more light. Sanhedrin 58b teaches that all mankind was originally prohibited from keeping Shabbat. The divine rest of Shabbat was God's alone at Sinai. However, Israel was commanded to partake in the divine rest of Shabbat as a sign of their unique covenant with God. With that being said, this is what we should understand. The meaning of Exodus 31:13 brings about a conclusion to this. You shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, you must keep my Shabbat, for it is a sign between me and the children of Israel. Very clear. A covenant sign between Israel, the Jewish people, and Hashem. In the Torah, the Hebrew word Shabbat may refer to the Shabbat, the seventh day, or any day upon which labor is prohibited by Torah. This would include festivals, if you understand what I mean. Noahides and Shabbat and the Shabbat festivals will be discussed extensively later on in the lessons to follow. The general rule governing these matters is this: they may not originate a new religion or create or perform a mitzvah for themselves based on their own reasoning. Very important words to nail down. Highlight it with your highlighter in your book, based on your own reasonings. We can go into details on that during the Q&A session. Either convert or accept all the mitzvot upon their commandments without adding or detracting from them. The words are in bold in Hebrew, and the term Chiddushei Dat is a very important term in understanding. From where does Maimonides derive this concept? Now, if a Gentile delves into the Torah or Shabbat or involves a religious practice, he's beaten, punished, and informed him that he is obligated to die for his actions. However, he's not exactly executed. Well, one would say, aren't I studying Torah now, taking this class? Obviously, the sages of Judaism have come to a clear understanding, and now we understand that there are rules that govern that, and you are now able to study Torah because of a better understanding of these texts. Let's look at paragraph 10. Should a non-Jew wish to perform one of the Torah's other mitzvahs in order to receive merit or benefit, we should not prevent him from doing so, even according to all of its details. If he brings an animal to be sacrificed as a burnt offering, we should accept it. So what does a non-Jew's motivation in doing a particular mitzvah mitigate the prohibition of Chiddushei Dat? Obviously, there are boundaries to this concept. So the big question is, what are those boundaries? If a non-Jew who keeps the Sheva Mitzvot gives charity, we should accept it from him. It appears to me that it should be given to the Jewish poor, for the non-Jews receives this sustenance from the Jewish community, who is obligated to support him. In contrast, if a regular non-Jew gives charity, we should accept it from him and then give it to the non-Jewish poor. You understand? You see the difference? It is curious that this paragraph is here instead of Maimonides' section on the laws of charity. Why didn't he just mention it there? Well, he doesn't. Maimonides, Hilchot Melachim, chapter 10, paragraph 9 and 10. According to the Radbaz, the most significant early explanation of this passage is from the Radbaz, Rabbi David Zimra. In paragraph 9, it states, a non-Jew who delves in the Torah is obligated to die. We've repeated this 3 times now. They should only be involved in the study of their 7 commandments. Similarly, a non-Jew who rests, even on the weekday, observing that day, similarly on the Shabbat, he is obligated to die. Needless to say, this is also the case if he creates a festival for himself. Now, the Radbaz quotes Rashi, who writes in his commentary on the Talmudic source that rest means that any kind of rest for any reason. However, the Radbaz adds this quote, this is if he establishes a day of rest. However, occasional cessation from labor is not prohibited. So what they're saying is this has to do with one non-Jew who says, this is my day of rest, which was commanded to me just like the Jews. That's creating another religion. However, one can rest. That's not what they were saying. They weren't saying that a non-Jew can't rest and have a cessation from their labor. Now, the general rule governing these matters is this. They may not originate a new religion or perform mitzvahs for themselves based on their own reasoning. That's the caveat. Either convert or accept all the mitzvahs or uphold the commandments without adding or detracting from them. Now, if a Gentile delves into the Torah or Shabbat or innovates a religious practice, he is beaten and punished. Inform him that he's obligated to die for his actions, and further states, however, he is not actually executed. Paragraph 10, repeating it again, should a non-Jew wish to perform one of the Torah's other mitzvahs in order to receive the merit and benefit, we should not prevent him from doing so, even according to all of its details. If he brings an animal sacrifice as a burnt offering, we should accept it. Now, it sounds like legalese doublespeak, but let me help you to further understand what the sages came up with and began to understand. The Radbaz writes these words. He says, if he wants, or the non-Jew wants to perform a mitzvah, saying that he has an obligation in the matter, we do not allow him to do so. Do you understand that? The bottom line is if you say, I'm doing this because God commanded the Jewish people, and I am going to follow because God commanded me to do it, you're not allowed to do it. Because God clearly did not command you to do that specific thing. However, he may perform it in order to receive reward as one who performs a mitzvah voluntarily. You hear the clarity that's coming here. That means that as a non-Jew, there isn't a mitzvah, in general, there isn't a mitzvah that you cannot perform as long as you're doing it voluntarily, without obligation, purely out of your devotion to Hashem and His Torah. This is why Maimonides is careful to write this word, in order to receive merit/benefit. If a non-Jew performs a mitzvah under the belief that God has any expectation or desire of his mitzvah, it is tantamount to creating a new mitzvah for himself. Do you get that? So the idea is this. The reason why there's such pushback on a non-Jew doing Jewish mitzvahs is they want to make sure the non-Jew understands that he cannot create a new religion. He's forbidden to do that. The only religion that a non-Jew has are the practices given to them from God to Moshe. And those practices are very specific. However, if they want to take on other mitzvahs that are found within the 613, there's nothing stopping them as long as they're doing it voluntarily and purely out of reward. After all mitzvahs are God's desire and will for our actions. If the performance of a mitzvah, though it is not tied to this belief and only to the desire for reward, then a non-Jew may perform any mitzvah. The Radbaz adds this: however, mitzvahs requiring unique levels of holiness and ritual purity, such as tefillin and Torah, scrolls, and mezuzos, have deliberated and concluded that we should be strict and not permit them. That means not allow a non-Jew to, say, wrap tefillin, or the idea of handling a Torah scroll and mezuzahs on the door. And now there are some rabbis, Rab Schwartz and others, who have made statements that as long as that person has permission from their rabbi to do so, he can do it, but it shouldn't be done haphazardly or willy-nilly. And another thing, they shouldn't be doing that particular act of mezuzah on the door, stating that God had commanded them to do it. And very much so, most Noahides that I know don't wrap tefillin, probably should not wrap tefillin, unless some rabbi approaches you and asks you to do it, which I can't see that happening. You should stay away from those things. Those are specifically commanded to the Jews. Now, I would like to summarize the Radbaz in his points. Number one, a non-Jew may not establish a particular day or fixed time to rest from labor. The type of labor or reason for rest doesn't really matter. The Radbaz is quoting and agreeing with Rashi on this point. A non-Jew may voluntarily perform any other mitzvah provided that he does so knowing that God has no desire or expectation for his action or any other motivation, i.e. reward is permissible. A non-Jew, number two, a non-Jew performs a mitzvah in which he is not obligated under the misguiding belief that God desires him to do so, transgresses Chiddushei Dat. He is adding a mitzvah to Noahides and effectively creating a new religion for himself. If you want to know the fulcrum in which all of these arguments are hinge on, it's the fact that non-Jews, when they come to Judaism as a Noahide, have to be very careful not to be creating another religion. This is the reason why Judaism and the sages of Judaism must dictate to the non-Jew their practices and mitzvot. Very important, so that we don't create another religion. There are a number of authorities coming both before and after who appear to confirm the Radbaz interpretation. Here's one. The Meri to Sanhedrin 59a, a non-Jew who performs other mitzvahs of the Torah is to be honored like a Kohen Gadol, a high priest. Maimonides himself, in a number of places, appears to confirm the Radbaz. For example, he writes that a non-Jew who does the mitzvah of circumcision receives reward. Most important, however, is what he writes in his commentary to the Mishnah. He states, for what reason is there for a non-Jew teruma or tithe and sanctified offering valid? Or is it valid for him to give a teruma offering or a tithe? Because even though they have no mitzvah or no obligation, if they do such a small thing, they should receive some reward. The Biur Halakha 304, paragraph 3, states, in explaining a difficult passage in the Mogen Avraham, writes that a Ger Toshav may accept any additional mitzvahs he chooses at the time of his conversion to Ger Toshav. The Biur explains that the prohibition on keeping Shabbat only applied to a Ger Toshav who did not accept Shabbat when he stood before Beis Din. Note that he views Ger Toshav as a religious rather than a legal status. And we know that there are different views on this. However, the Radbaz opinion is not final. As we'll see, there are a number of difficult questions posed by Maimonides alone. The Talmud is unambiguously clear on this point. Noahides, who, for the sake of reward, perform mitzvahs in which they are not obligated, do not receive reward for doing so. How do they resolve this contradiction that we see with the sages. Now we're going to examine this much closer, all of these issues in the next lesson. Whenever you begin to take this course and begin to hear the different chapters and paragraphs of the Talmud, Mishnah, and the great sages of Judaism, we hear their legal arguments back and forth. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing. But once again, I want to get back to the core that I mentioned in the last class. Don't forget that this is about the matter of the heart. The reason why that we seek guidance from Jewish rabbis and we seek guidance from the sages of Judaism is that we want to have a pure, unadulterated, authentic relationship with the Master of the universe, blessed be He. And how can we do it if we're convoluted in our thinking and trying to make religion in our own image? We're not here to do that. We're here to connect to Hashem. And we're seeking the guidance of the great sages of Judaism to find out how it is to be done. So in conclusion, if you're a non-Jew and you're seeking connection with Hashem, focus on the 7 categories. Focus on all of the roots that go into the many different mitzvahs and laws within the 613. Find out what it means to steal, for example, or to rob, and see the tentacles that go all the way through Torah thinking and logic that even states that if you speak Lashon Hara against someone, you are robbing them or stealing or even killing them. So look, the Sheva mitzvot are plenty to study. If one wants to take on another mitzvah, whatever it may be, to eat kosher, to pray 3 times a day, to say certain prayers, say the evening prayers or the morning prayers. If you do it, not because you're obligated, but doing it because out of love for Hashem and a desire to connect to Hashem, nobody's stopping you. Not a single rabbi would stop you, or one that has this knowledge. So I say be encouraged. And let's tune in to the next class dealing with this very same subject in which we break down these difficult passages and find more incredible encouragement. Shalom.